"No one's ever touched me there," the innocent giant bride said, but the gentle rancher made her. The ranch sat at the edge of a wide valley, where the land opened into long stretches of grass and quiet dirt roads. Life there moved slowly, shaped by sunrise, animal care, and weather. The man who owned the land had lived that rhythm for most of his adult life. People in the nearby town knew him as calm, steady, and gentle. He spoke little, worked hard, and never raised his voice. He believed problems were solved with patience, not force. Marriage had never been his plan. He had always thought it would come naturally one day, but the years passed and life stayed the same. When his family suggested a match, he did not refuse. He did not agree out of excitement either. He accepted because it felt like the next responsibility, something to be done carefully and honestly, like everything else in his life. The woman he was to marry came from a very different background. She had grown up sheltered, protected, and watched closely by her family. She was tall and strong-looking, which made people expect confidence from her, but inside she was quiet and unsure. She had spent most of her life being told to be careful, to stay back, to avoid attention. Because of this, she had little experience with the world beyond her home. When the marriage was arranged, she did not protest. She believed that this was simply how life worked. She did not dream of romance or grand gestures. What she feared was the unknown. Leaving her familiar space and living with someone she barely knew filled her with silent worry. She did not know what would be expected of her as a wife, and no one had ever explained it clearly. Their first meeting was brief and awkward. They stood across from each other, both unsure of where to place their hands or eyes. He noticed how stiff she looked, as if ready to step back at any moment. She noticed how careful his movements were, as though he did not want to frighten her. They exchanged polite words, nothing more. The wedding was small and simple. There were no dramatic moments, no loud celebrations. People smiled, offered blessings, and then went back to their lives. When it was over, the reality settled in quietly. They were married now. Two strangers tied together by promise and expectation. The journey to the ranch felt longer than it was. She watched the road through the window, holding her bag tightly. He drove in silence, giving her space. He knew she was nervous, and he did not want to add to it. When they arrived, the ranch stood calm and open, nothing threatening about it. Still, she hesitated before stepping inside the house. The house was modest but clean. Everything had a place. He showed her the room slowly, explaining where things were, speaking gently. He made sure she knew which room would be hers. He did not assume anything. This surprised her. She had expected firm rules, perhaps demands. Instead, she was given choice. That first evening, they ate dinner at the same table but barely spoke. The sound of cutlery felt loud in the quiet room. She kept her eyes down, afraid of doing something wrong. He noticed her tension and tried to ease it by talking about the ranch, the animals, and the weather. Simple topics, safe ones. After dinner, he stood and told her she should rest. He would take care of the chores outside. She watched him leave, unsure of what she was feeling. Relief mixed with confusion. She had expected more questions, more instructions. Instead, she was left alone with her thoughts. That night, sleep did not come easily for either of them. She lay awake, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the house. Every creak made her tense. Her mind filled with questions she did not know how to ask. On the other side of the house, he stared at the ceiling, wondering if he was doing the right thing. He did not want her to feel trapped or afraid. He did not know how to reach her without pushing too far. The days that followed settled into a routine. He woke early, worked long hours, and returned tired but calm. She helped where she could, learning slowly. She was quiet, careful, always watching his reactions. He noticed how she flinched at sudden noises and how she stiffened when someone stood too close. He never commented on it. Instead, he gave her space. Neighbors came by occasionally, curious about the new bride. She answered politely but kept her distance. People whispered about her size, her silence, her strange calm. She heard the comments but said nothing. She had learned long ago that silence was safer. One afternoon, while folding laundry together, a small moment changed the air between them. She dropped a stack of clothes by accident. She froze, expecting anger. Instead, he bent down and helped her pick them up without a word. When he looked at her, there was no blame in his eyes, only patience. Her chest tightened, not with fear, but with something unfamiliar. That night she spoke more than she had since arriving. She asked him why he was so kind. The question surprised him. He answered simply that kindness was easier than cruelty, and that fear had no place in a home. She listened carefully, storing his words like something precious. Slowly she began to relax in small ways. She moved a little more freely around the house. She spoke a little louder. She even laughed once, a soft sound that surprised them both. He did not comment on it, but the moment stayed with him. Still, there was distance. Both were careful not to cross it. She did not know how to step closer, and he did not want to rush her. Nights passed quietly. Days continued steadily. To outsiders, it might have looked like a cold marriage. Inside, something fragile was forming. She often thought about her past, about how no one had ever prepared her for partnership. She had been taught to obey, to stay quiet, to endure. She had never been taught how to trust. Living with him was slowly challenging those beliefs. His consistency made her question what she had always assumed about closeness. He, too, was learning. He had thought strength meant providing and protecting. Now he was realizing that strength could also mean waiting, listening, and allowing someone to move at their own pace. He was careful with every word, every action. By the end of the first month, the house felt less empty, not full but warmer. They still sat across from each other at meals, but sometimes their eyes met. Sometimes they shared stories from their childhoods. Small things but meaningful. One evening, as the sun set over the fields, they stood side by side on the porch. Neither spoke. The silence was no longer uncomfortable. It was shared. In that quiet moment, both understood that their journey was not about rushing towards something, but about slowly building a space where neither felt afraid. And though neither said it out loud, both felt that this was only the beginning. Morning light came softly through the ranch house windows, touching the wooden floor and the quiet walls. The days now followed a pattern, but inside that pattern, both of them were changing in ways they did not yet fully understand. They lived under the same roof, shared meals, and worked the same land, yet they still felt like careful strangers walking around each other. She woke early each day, often before him. At first, it was because she could not sleep well. Her mind stayed alert, listening for sounds, preparing herself for problems that never came. Over time, waking early became a habit. She liked the calm before the ranch came alive. In those hours, she felt a little more in control. She began helping more around the house. She cleaned, cooked simple meals, and slowly learned the rhythm of ranch life. Sometimes she watched him from a distance as he worked with the animals. He spoke to them in a low, steady voice, never harsh, never rushed. She noticed how the animals trusted him, how they stayed calm around him. That quiet control made her feel safer, even though she rarely said it out loud. He noticed her changes too. At first, she had moved like a guest afraid to break something. Now she walked with slightly more confidence, though her shoulders were still tense. He could tell she was always ready to pull back. He respected that. He did not ask questions that might make her uncomfortable. He believed that trust, once broken or never built, had to be earned slowly. Meals were still quiet but no longer heavy. Sometimes he talked about small things, weather patterns, the condition of the land, stories from town. She listened carefully. Occasionally, she responded with short comments. Each reply felt like a small step forward. There were moments when silence returned suddenly. A loud noise, a visitor arriving without warning, or a question asked too quickly could make her withdraw again. He noticed this and adjusted. He learned to announce himself when entering a room. He learned to move slower. He learned to wait. She struggled with her own thoughts. Part of her wondered why he was so patient. She had been taught that marriage came with strict rules and expectations. Yet here she was, weeks into it, and nothing had been demanded of her. That confused her more than anything. Sometimes confusion felt heavier than fear. Neighbors continued to stop by. Some were friendly, some curious. They asked polite questions, offered advice she did not ask for, and watched her closely. She felt their eyes measure her, judge her. He always stayed near during these visits, not controlling the situation but quietly present. If she looked uncomfortable, he gently guided the conversation away or found a reason to end the visit. One afternoon, a neighbor made an unkind remark about her quiet nature. She froze, words stuck in her throat. Before she could react, he calmly responded, defending her without raising his voice. He did not insult the neighbor or cause a scene. He simply stated that silence was not weakness. The conversation ended soon after. She did not say anything right away, but later that evening while washing dishes, her hands trembled slightly. He noticed and offered to take over. She shook her head and finished the task. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft. She thanked him. He nodded as if it were nothing, but inside, he felt something shift. Protecting her felt natural. That night, she thought about how no one had ever stood up for her so quietly before. People had either ignored her or spoken over her. His simple defense meant more than dramatic words ever could. It made her feel less alone. As days passed, she began to share small details about her life before the ranch. She spoke of her family, her strict upbringing, and how decisions were always made for her. She explained how being different had made her careful. He listened without interrupting. He did not offer advice unless she asked. Sometimes just being heard was enough. He shared parts of his past too. He spoke about growing up on the land, learning responsibility early, and losing people without ever learning how to express grief. He admitted that he was not good with emotions, but he tried to be honest. She appreciated that. His honesty made his quiet nature feel less distant. Still, there was a line neither crossed. Physical closeness remained limited. They sat across from each other, not beside. When passing in the hallway, they kept a respectful distance. This was unspoken but understood. She needed space, and he would not take it from her. There were moments she questioned herself. She wondered if she was failing as a wife by being so withdrawn. Those thoughts troubled her deeply. One evening, she tried to apologize for being distant. Her words came out rushed and shaky. He stopped her gently and told her there was nothing to apologize for. He said that being present in her own way was enough. His response stayed with her. For the first time, she considered the idea that she was not broken. That maybe her pace was acceptable. That thought brought both relief and fear. Relief because it eased her guilt. Fear because it challenged everything she had been taught. Life on the ranch continued. Seasons shifted slowly. With each passing week, the house felt less like a place she was temporarily staying and more like a place she belonged. She began to add small personal touches, a folded cloth here, a plant near the window. He noticed but did not comment. He understood that claiming space was important. One rainy evening the power went out. Darkness filled the house suddenly. She panicked, breath quickening. Before she could retreat into herself, he calmly lit a lantern and placed it between them. He spoke gently, grounding her with his voice. He did not touch her, did not crowd her. He simply stayed close enough to be felt, not forced. They sat there for a long time, listening to the rain and the quiet. In that moment, the distance between them felt smaller, even without words. She realized that trust was not built through grand actions, but through consistency in moments like this. Later that night, as they prepared to sleep, she paused at her doorway. She wanted to say something important but did not yet have the words. He waited, patient as always. Finally, she said she felt safe here. The words surprised both of them. He thanked her quietly, understanding the weight behind them. As part two of their journey came to a close, they were still not a traditional couple. They were not openly affectionate or deeply connected yet, but they were no longer strangers either. They were two people learning how to exist together without fear, without pressure, and without expectations that did not fit. The space between them was still there, but it was no longer empty. It was filled with understanding, patience, and the slow, careful beginnings of trust. The days grew warmer, and with them came changes that were harder to see but deeply felt. By now, the ranch no longer felt strange to her. The sounds, the routines, even the wide open land had become familiar. Yet inside her, something restless had begun to stir. It was not fear exactly, but a heavy feeling she carried quietly, unsure of how to release it. She had grown used to his steady presence. He was always there in the background, never pushing, never demanding. His kindness had become predictable, and that made it powerful. Still, predictability also brought questions. She wondered how long this gentle distance could last. She wondered what he expected from her that he had not said out loud. He sensed a change in her too. She seemed thoughtful, often lost in her own mind. Sometimes she would start to speak and then stop. He did not rush her. He had learned that when she was ready, she would find the words herself. One evening, after a long day, they sat at the table later than usual. The house was quiet. The air felt different, heavier somehow. She kept turning her cup slowly in her hands. He noticed but waited. Silence had become something they both understood. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was low, unsure, but steady enough to be heard. She said she needed to talk. He looked at her with full attention, giving her space without leaving the room. He told her he was listening. At first, her words came slowly. She spoke about growing up feeling watched all the time, how every action was judged, how mistakes were remembered longer than successes. She explained how she learned to stay quiet to avoid trouble. Silence had been her shield for most of her life. As she spoke, her hands trembled slightly. She did not look at him, afraid of what she might see in his face. He did not interrupt. He did not react strongly. He simply listened, which gave her the courage to continue. She admitted that she did not understand how close people were supposed to be. She said that no one had ever explained it to her, that she felt behind, unsure, and embarrassed. She worried that she was disappointing him, even though he had never said so. Her voice broke when she said she did not know how to be what others expected. She confessed that closeness frightened her, not because of him, but because it was unfamiliar. She had lived her whole life without it, and the idea of it felt overwhelming. When she finally stopped speaking, the room felt very still. She waited for his response, bracing herself for disappointment or frustration. Instead, he took a slow breath and spoke carefully. He told her that nothing she had said changed how he saw her. He said that everyone moves through life at a different pace, and there was no right or wrong way to learn trust. He assured her that she was not failing him, and that she did not owe him anything she was not ready to give. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and saw no judgment, only concern and understanding. That was when the weight she had been carrying began to lift, just a little. Encouraged by his response, she shared more. She talked about how her size had made people treat her differently. Some expected strength she did not feel. Others kept their distance. Few ever tried to understand her. Over time, she had learned to accept being misunderstood. He admitted that he had noticed her discomfort from the beginning. He said he had chosen patience because he believed fear should never be part of a partnership. He explained that he wanted their home to be a place where she could feel safe enough to be herself. That word, safe, stayed with her. She realized that safety was not something she had experienced often, not in a deep, lasting way. Hearing him speak of it so naturally made her emotional. The conversation stretched long into the night. They talked about expectations, about silence, about how hard it was to unlearn habits built from years of caution. She said she did not know what the future should look like. He said they did not need to decide everything now. At one point, she apologized again for being distant. This time, he gently stopped her. He told her that distance was not the same as rejection. He said he felt honored that she trusted him enough to speak at all. Those words stayed with her. Being honored was not something she had ever felt before. After that night, something between them changed. Not dramatically, not suddenly, but noticeably. The air felt lighter. She seemed to breathe more easily. He felt more confident that he was doing the right thing. In the days that followed, she was quieter than usual, but it was a thoughtful quiet, not a fearful one. She replayed their conversation in her mind, examining every word. She realized that for the first time, she had spoken her truth without being dismissed. He noticed that she began to sit a little closer at the table, not close enough to touch, but no longer at the far end. It was a small shift, but meaningful. He did not comment on it, knowing that pointing it out might make her retreat. One afternoon, while working together in the yard, she asked him a question she had never dared to ask anyone before. She asked how he knew when to trust someone. He thought about it for a moment and said trust was not a decision made once, but a choice made again and again through actions. She considered that answer carefully. It made sense. It meant that trust could grow slowly, just like everything else. That evening, as they prepared dinner together, there was an ease between them that had not been there before. They moved around each other without tension. Their conversations flowed more naturally. When their hands accidentally brushed while reaching for the same item, she stiffened slightly, then relaxed. He noticed and said nothing. That moment stayed with her. She realized that the fear she once felt was slowly being replaced by curiosity. Not about what was expected of her, but about what might be possible. As the days went on, she began to understand that her confession had not pushed him away. Instead, it had brought them closer. She felt stronger knowing that her truth had been met with patience rather than pressure. He, too, felt changed. He understood her better now, and that understanding deepened his respect for her. He no longer saw her silence as distance, but as a language of its own. By the end of this part of their journey, they were no longer just sharing a house. They were sharing something more delicate and powerful, a growing sense of trust built on honesty. The space between them still existed, but it no longer felt like a barrier. It felt like a bridge that was slowly being built, one careful step at a time. The change after their long conversation was quiet but steady. Nothing dramatic happened the next day or the day after that. Yet both of them felt it. Something important had shifted, like the ground settling after a long storm. The house felt lighter, and so did their steps within it. She woke one morning and realized she was no longer counting the hours. Before, she had always measured time, waiting for days to end, waiting for weeks to pass. Now she simply moved through the morning without that wait. She made tea, opened the window, and let the fresh air fill the room. For the first time, she noticed that she liked the smell of the land. He noticed her calm before she did. She hummed softly while working, a sound so faint it almost disappeared into the room. He paused when he heard it, surprised. He did not mention it, knowing that naming it might make it vanish. Instead, he carried that sound with him through the day. They began spending more time in the same space, not because they planned it, but because it felt natural. She sat at the table while he worked nearby. He stayed in the room while she prepared meals. Silence still existed, but it was no longer filled with tension. It felt comfortable, shared. She started asking small questions, not heavy ones, just curious ones. She asked about the land, about how long he had lived there, about what he enjoyed most about his work. He answered honestly. Sometimes he smiled without realizing it. Her interest made him feel seen in a way he had not expected. He, in turn, began asking gentle questions about her preferences, what food she liked, what time of day she felt most at ease, whether she preferred quiet music or none at all. These questions were simple, but to her they mattered. They told her that her comfort was important. There were moments when old fears returned. A sudden noise might still make her tense. A visitor might still make her quiet again. But now, instead of retreating fully, she recovered faster. She reminded herself of his words, of the patience he had shown. Each time she faced her fear without hiding, she felt a little stronger. One afternoon, while sorting supplies in the storage room, she slipped on the floor. It was nothing serious, but it startled her. Her breath caught and she froze. He was there in seconds, stopping at a careful distance. He asked if she was hurt, his voice calm and steady. She shook her head. After a pause, she nodded, allowing him to help her up. His support was firm but gentle. When she stood on her own again, she realized she was not shaking. That realization stayed with her. Later that evening, she thought about that moment, how natural it had felt to accept help, how little fear there had been. She understood then that trust was no longer just an idea. It was something she was beginning to practice. He also noticed changes in himself. He found that he no longer had to think so carefully about every move. Being patient with her had taught him patience with himself. He felt calmer, more present. For the first time in years, he felt like his home was not just a place to return to, but a place to share. They began taking short walks together in the evenings. At first, they walked a few steps apart. Over time, the distance closed naturally. They talked about simple things, the sky, the animals, memories from childhood. Sometimes they walked in silence, listening to the sounds of the land. Those walks became something she looked forward to. During one walk, she stopped and looked out at the fields. She told him that she had never imagined feeling peaceful in a place like this. She admitted that she had once believed peace was not meant for her. He listened quietly and told her that peace was not something people earned. It was something they allowed themselves to feel. That idea stayed with her. Allowing herself to feel peace felt like an act of courage. Inside the house, she began to change small things. She rearranged furniture to make spaces feel warmer. She added soft cloths, gentle colors, small details that reflected her taste. He noticed and thanked her for making the house feel more alive. That simple acknowledgement filled her with pride. One evening, she asked him if he ever felt lonely before she arrived. The question surprised him. He thought carefully before answering. He admitted that he had been lonely, but he had not known it at the time. He had been used to being alone. She told him that she understood that feeling very well. That shared understanding brought them closer than words ever could. There were moments when she tested her own limits, sitting closer, staying in the room longer, speaking more openly. Each time he responded with the same steady calm. He never rushed her, never took more than she offered. That consistency made her trust deeper. One night during a storm, thunder echoed loudly across the land. She startled and paused in the hallway. Without thinking, she walked toward him. He noticed and simply stayed where he was. She sat nearby, not touching but close enough to feel his presence. They listened to the storm together. When it passed, she realized she had not felt afraid. After that night, something inside her settled. She understood that safety did not mean the absence of fear. It meant having someone who would not leave when fear appeared. By now, others could see the change too. Neighbors commented that she seemed more confident, more at ease. She smiled politely but said little. This growth felt personal, something she wanted to protect. He felt proud of her progress, but he never said it out loud. He knew she did not need praise. She needed space to become herself. As this part of their journey came to an end, they were no longer defined by distance or uncertainty. They were defined by patience, shared effort, and quiet courage. They were still learning, still growing, but they were doing it together. The trust between them was no longer fragile. It was becoming strong enough to carry them forward, step by careful step, into whatever came next. The days moved forward gently, like a slow river that no longer felt dangerous to cross. By now, the ranch felt like a true home to both of them. not because everything was perfect, but because it was honest. Each day carried small signs of growth, and together, those signs formed something strong and lasting. She woke one morning and realized she no longer felt like a guest in her own life. That thought surprised her. For so long, she had lived as if she were borrowing space, borrowing time, waiting for permission to exist fully. Now, she moved through the house with ease. She opened doors without hesitation. She spoke without rehearsing every word in her mind. He noticed the confidence in her steps. It was not loud or bold, but steady. She no longer shrank when others spoke. She held her ground quietly. Watching her grow filled him with a deep sense of respect. He did not see her as someone he had helped or changed. He saw her as someone who had found her own strength. Their days became more connected. They planned meals together. They worked side by side without awkward pauses. Sometimes they laughed over small mistakes. The laughter was still soft, but it was real. It filled the house in a way silence never could. One afternoon, while sitting outside, she spoke about her future for the first time. She said she wanted to learn more, to contribute more, to be part of decisions instead of standing back. Saying those words out loud felt powerful. He listened carefully and told her he supported her fully. He reminded her that the ranch was as much hers as it was his. That statement stayed with her. Belonging had always felt distant, like something other people experienced. Now it felt possible. There were still moments of doubt. Some old fears returned when she least expected them, but now she faced them differently. Instead of hiding, she spoke. Instead of shrinking, she paused and breathed. Each time she chose honesty, the fear lost a little of its power. He learned too. He learned that care did not mean control. It meant trust. He allowed her space to make choices, even when he worried. He knew that strength grew best when it was not protected too tightly. One evening, after a long day, they sat together watching the sky change colors. She told him that she never thought she would feel calm like this. Not just safe, but calm. He replied that calm came from knowing you were accepted as you were. She looked at him then and understood something important. He had never tried to shape her into someone else. He had simply stood beside her while she became herself. Over time, their bond deepened naturally, not through pressure or expectation, but through shared effort. They trusted each other with thoughts they had never spoken aloud before. They respected each other's limits. They celebrated each other's growth quietly. The house reflected their partnership. It felt balanced, warm, and lived in. Visitors noticed it too. They spoke of how peaceful the place felt. She smiled when she heard that, knowing how hard she had worked to feel peace herself. One day, she received a letter from her family. In the past, such messages filled her with worry. This time, she read it calmly. She realized that she no longer needed their approval to feel whole. That realization brought both sadness and freedom, but she handled it with strength. He supported her without trying to guide her feelings. He understood that some journeys had to be walked alone, even within a partnership. That respect made their bond stronger than ever. As seasons changed, their relationship settled into something steady and real. There were no dramatic promises or loud declarations. Instead, there was consistency. There was care. There was trust built from shared mornings and quiet nights. She often thought about who she had been when she first arrived at the ranch. That woman had been afraid, unsure, and silent. She did not judge her past self. Instead, she felt compassion. Growth, she realized, did not mean rejecting who you were. It meant understanding why you were that way. He, too, reflected on how much he had changed. He had learned that gentleness was not weakness. It was a form of strength that required patience and courage. Loving someone gently had taught him more than force ever could. One evening, as they sat together after finishing the day's work, she thanked him, not for saving her or fixing her, but for walking beside her. He told her that she had done the hard work herself. He had simply stayed. That moment felt like a quiet promise between them, a promise to continue choosing patience, honesty, and respect. Their marriage was no longer defined by uncertainty or distance. It was defined by understanding. They were equals, standing side by side, moving forward together. The ranch remained the same, quiet and open, but the lives within it had changed deeply. What began as an arrangement had grown into a partnership built on trust. What began with fear had grown into calm confidence, and as they looked toward the future, neither felt afraid. They knew that whatever came next, they would face it with the same steady care that had brought them this far.